brothers and sisters. Your brother Shamsuddha here. In today's video, I want to share a few points with you about how to deal with young people who have doubts about Islam. This is a difficult issue. I haven't got all of the answers, but I have some experience. For a number of years now, I've dealt with young people coming to me with doubts, and I've taken on board their feedback as well about how they've been dealt with and their reactions to that and their response to that. And some of these points are basically based on that experience. So, firstly, if a young person comes to you with doubts about Islam, and they say, you know what, this either I don't believe Islam is true, or I'm not sure if Islam is the truth, or and so on, or they have doubts because they believe in something that they think is contradictory to Islam, or perhaps you feel the same way. I don't know, perhaps it could be a particular aspect of science like evolution, or there's a particular bit of Islam that they have a serious problem with, that that makes them question the validity of Islam, and so on, right? They've come and they've come to you. You've encountered them, and obviously whenever this happens, it's natural for a Muslim to feel a great deal of pain as a result of this, right? Somebody's come to you with doubts. It's going to be quite painful for you to hear them talk about it. So we kind of need to be ready for it, and we need to steel ourselves. We need to consider what our response is going to be. And then that pain is further exaggerated, enhanced, intensified if the young person that's come to you is somebody that you personally know, and if it's family, right? Then it gets really, really serious, and then emotions get involved and so on. So this is actually becoming more and more common, and Allah forbid it, Allah protect us and protect our children. This is my dua, but it is happening, right? It's happening, and we need to know how to deal with it, and we need to steel ourselves, right? So many people, 70% of young people, according to a piece of research by St. Mary's University, 70% of young people under the age of 29, right, no longer associate with religion. 70%, right? So new research is coming out, and each one is giving us higher numbers, right? It used to be, 50%, I think, was the census stat, if I recall correctly. So we've got a serious issue on our hands. If 70% of, generally, if the statistic is 70%, then a significant number of Muslim youth are also not associating with Islam, even though they might not be admitting it. And people find some of these statistics unbelievable. Do you know what? I don't find them unbelievable because I'm dealing with them. And the disbelief about people leaving Islam kind of leaves people when somebody they know comes up and says, that they have doubts about Islam, or they say that they don't believe in Allah, or they don't, and so on. A'udhu billah. But in my experience, I'm finding that more and more people don't find this surprising anymore. Okay, and it's not Islam's fault; it's our fault. We just haven't taught Islam correctly or properly to young people. We've not nurtured them upon Islam in the right way. We haven't nurtured them upon Islam in a manner that is contextual to the situation that they are in, to the society that they are in, to the environment that they are in, to the intellectual, psychological, and social milieu that they are in. We haven't responded by teaching Islam in accordance with that, right? And to an extent, we've become victim of that statement. مَنْ لَمْ يَعْرِفْ أَهْلَ زَمَانِهِ فَهُوَ جَاهِلٌ. Whoever doesn't know the people of their time is an ignorant person. And essentially what we've done is we've taught Islam, but not with a knowledge of the times and the peoples that Islam is interacting with. And by Islam, we mean Muslims. So, number one of my few points about how to deal with young people with doubts is do not respond with outrage. Do not respond with outrage, as that would be the same as slamming a door in someone's face. So somebody comes to you with a doubt, and especially if, like you're an imam, for example, right? Somebody comes up to you and says, you know what, I have this doubt about Islam. I'm not sure that this particular aspect of Islam is correct or true or moral, whatever. And you're like, and your response is, Astaghfirullah, A'udhu Billah, or something like that, You do something like that, you've kind of lost the person already. Because what you're basically saying is the only kind of your only thought about them is that you see them as some sort of adversary, right? And usually, when people are dealt with outrage, they often see that as rude, and they take offense, and then they shut the other person out. So they came to you hoping for one thing, hoping that you might give them an answer, but you've now offended them. They're no longer interested in what you have to say. And usually what then happens is that outrage doesn't remove the doubt. It usually makes the doubt fester. So I've sat with young people, for example, who've come to me and they've said, I've been to loads of imams with these questions and I've received nothing but offense. Right? They've been rude to me. They've done this. They responded with outrage and things like that. And all it's done is just made my doubts grow, because it seems to me like they respond in that way because they don't have the answer. Right? So I've been to so many of my imams. They don't have answers. Does that mean Islam doesn't have an answer? That's not a good situation to put a young person in. And we don't want to be the ones contributing to their doubts because of the way we reacted. So don't respond with outrage. Be open to the fact that this is happening. In fact, if you just calm yourself in that moment and allow yourself to follow the steps that I'm about to give you, chances are you might actually be able to help the person. All right? So that's the first step. Number 2, do not take the mick. All right? Do not take the mick. Don't mock the person and so on. The impression you leave will definitely strengthen the doubts if that is what you're doing. And sometimes and often, doubts in Islam are because of Muslims, not because of Islam. It's because of Muslims, and that's actually what some of the studies into apostasy and the reasons for people leaving Islam actually show. All right, I'll give you a story. I once went to Umrah with a group, and it turns out that one of the guys in the group didn't actually believe in Allah, but had been pressured by parents to kind of go Umrah. And the appeal to it was basically that, maybe you'll feel something spiritual. Parents thought that they would be spiritually convinced and so on. And they went through the first half of the Umrah trip without me kind of realizing what was going on. But others had realized that there's an issue with this guy. And then at some point in the second half of the trip, this person came to my attention and we sat and had a conversation. And his first one of his early responses to me in the conversation was that this is the first time someone has actually sat down and had a conversation with me and taken me seriously. So far, I have been by all of these brothers, and he said it with some degree of sarcasm and distaste, I must say, that these practicing brothers who practice Islam, have only met me, have met with nothing but ridicule and mockery, and they've resorted to innuendo and taking and mick taking and things like that, which was it was unfortunate. It was a sad thing for me to hear, because it probably there's probably lots and lots of assumptions he's made about Muslims, and this has just confirmed them. And generally, people tend to take the mick and so on when they can't engage with the issue. But it's sad. It doesn't work. Don't do it. Don't take the mick. All right. And it is a serious issue, though, isn't it? If somebody comes up to you and says they have doubts about Islam. Isn't that a serious issue? Isn't that the front line of da'wah? Is it not our responsibility to take Islam to people and to call people unto Islam with wisdom and good counsel? Why is it any different when somebody comes to us with doubts? Right? So think about that. Okay, the third thing, do not make assumptions and be judgmental, right? You might think you know what's going on, but you probably don't. You might have seen YouTube videos, debates between Sheikh so-and-so and such an atheist, and you know what's going on, and you know a few things, and you're a bit of a da'i yourself, or you are an imam, or you're a scholar, or you're kind of well-read, etc. You've encountered these people before, and you quickly make assumptions about what's going on with these persons, with this particular individual. Don't make assumptions, because every person is different. Every person's reason is different. Every person's doubt is different. Don't make assumptions. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't butt in. Right? Follow the next piece of advice, i.e., hear them out. So if you've taken the first 3 points into consideration, what you would have probably done is at least given the person the time of day, right? And allowed them to kind of come to you, sit down, speak to you, tell you their problem, and you wouldn't have responded in a manner that would have perhaps put them off, right? If you've avoided being judgmental, if you've avoided, mocking them, if you've avoided responding in outrage, then you're now in a position to have a conversation. Now that you've avoided those 3 things, listen. Listening is extremely important. Ask, let them speak and inquire. Take an interest in what has happened. What exactly is the nature of their doubt? And remember this always. This is really, really important, right? A doubt can always be reformulated as a question. Somebody says, I have a doubt about Islam. You can take that moment, compose yourself, let them say their piece, let them introduce what their doubt is. And you can say, do you know what? How about, you can put this proposition forward. How about we think of your doubts as questions? Like, these are questions. I have doubts about Islam because of the theory of evolution, right? So that can be reformulated, right? And you can say, I have a question about Islam and evolution. And reformulating, thinking of a doubt as a question also makes it easier for us to kind of compose ourselves and not react, right? Or not overreact to somebody coming up saying, I have doubts. You can just kind of calm the situation and say, do you know what? You can think of this as a question, right? A question that brings up all sorts of thoughts in our minds can be seen as a doubt, but why use the word doubt? Why not use the word question? Maybe it's just a question and it can easily be answered, right? And as the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا شِفَاءُ الْعَيِّ السُّؤَالِ, the kind of feeling of frustration and anxiety that is brought on by having a question in one's mind that hasn't been answered. The best way to deal with it and to remove it and to cure that condition is to ask the question. And that's all this person is doing. So essentially, they don't have a doubt about Islam. They have a question. And now they're following the sunnah by asking that question to somebody. Right? And think of it in this way. Now, once you kind of become, you're able to handle, this person coming up to you and speaking to you about their doubts, let them ask their question and inquire and find out more about how they came to this question or this doubt. And one way to do this, and I got this idea from a sociological study into apostasy, is ask how rather than ask why. Why do you have these doubts? Why do you have these questions? Instead, ask, how did you come to have these doubts? How did you come to have these questions? Because if you question how, you'll get more of a story rather than a reason. And the reason doesn't often tell you the contextual story behind the doubt. And the story probably explains it better than what the person assumes is the reason for the doubt. So if you say, why do you have this doubt? The person might say, I have this doubt because of evolution. But if you say, if you ask, how did you come to have this doubt? Then chances are there's more to it. How they came, because there's a question, right? How did they come to accepting the theory of evolution as something that is contradictory with Islam? The how question gets you more. And the point here is really, you're not trying to suss people out and and figure out how am I going to debate them. That's not the point. The point is that you want to genuinely listen to them and understand them. You are taking interest in that person so that if they will accept it and if they will allow it, you can help them, or you can direct them to someone who might be able to help them. Which brings me to my next point, right? And the next point is that if your intention is to help them, then don't give them a fatwa. And obviously this applies to students of knowledge, scholars, muftis, but also applies to ordinary people who think they know the answer, who think they know the fatwa. And when I mean the language of fatwa, what I mean is, don't jump to answering the question, right? People tend to be like, I know the answer to this, boom, I'm going to give it. I'm going to drop the answer. So don't use the language of fatwa. Oh, you know what? You have to be careful with this because this kind of thing can lead to apostasy and take you outside of Islam. Or do you know what? This is doubting something that is an absolute in the deen, and anybody who doubts something that is an absolute in the deen is a kafir, etc. The person may already be there. They're talking about doubts. It's not going to help if you confirm that doubt by taking the language of fatwa. Here's a person wondering whether they're still Muslim or not, right? And they're in a position where they're willing to accept kufr, perhaps, if their curiosity isn't satisfied. And your response is to confirm their kufr by giving them a fatwa. Not a good idea. Next thing, they're going to be like, oh, okay, so I'm already a kafir. All right, fine. What's the point? I'll just walk away. All right? So don't use the language of fatwa. Don't use the language of warnings. To them, oh, do you know what, bro? Do you want to burn in hellfire forever, etc., etc. Yeah, but the guy's not sure if he believes in Allah. How's that going to help? All right? Some of those things could be brought in the process of a dialogue, and it might be that those things might be useful at some point. But it's not a good idea kind of throw them at a person right at the beginning, because you haven't even started a dialogue yet. All right, so listen. Don't use the language of fatwa. Don't use the language of warnings and wa'id. You throw verses at people and you say, those who turn away from deen, Allah doesn't need them, etc., etc. Maybe that's what it's going to eventually come to, but there's a long way to go, right? In an Islamic state, if a person leaves Islam, actually declares themselves having left Islam, a scholar is sent to them to invite them back to Islam and discuss their issues and doubts with them for days on end. You understand? So keep that in mind, inshallah. All right. The next point is trust that Islam has the answers, and call upon them to be sincere, open-minded, and rational. Let's say it's somebody that you know from the area, Allah forbid it, but a family member or somebody like that, right? And they come to you and they have doubts and so on and so forth. Obviously they're inquiring, which is why they've come to you. Obviously they're still inquisitive, which is why they come to you. There is an element of truth seeking still within them that has brought them to you. There is some concern in themselves about themselves, which has brought them to you, right? So the first thing really is to bring them to a neutral position of sincerity and being open to the truth. It's natural. For example, if we take that route, if we take that approach of thinking of doubts in terms of questions, we can say to people, well, it's natural to have questions about these things. We're human beings, are curious, and we absorb so much information. Some of it agrees with our Iman and some of it doesn't, and so on. Sometimes we don't know how to process it. But what's important is for us to be open to the truth and to be sincere. What does that mean, right? And that means that people have to put their conflicts of interest on the table. The first thing to do is help a person put their conflicts of interest in front of them and on the table, so that at least they can evaluate whether they are entertaining doubts about Islam because there is something in Islam that goes against their desires, or not because of any truth, but because they just find it difficult, right? And so on. So it's really, really important that the first thing that we impart upon a person, if we do get to the point of offering some advice, is to try to at least establish that neutral territory of sincerity, open-mindedness, and just a position where, like, a person, you understand that a person is willing to put their bias aside and consider the question of truth seriously and open-mindedly. And then if you have the knowledge, perhaps the training, the experience, reason with them. If you don't think you have the ability, then know your limits and refer them to someone who can reason with them and enter into dialogue with them and help them. Okay, the next thing to consider when speaking to somebody who has doubts about Islam is, if you do not understand the context of the doubt, don't try to give absolute answers. They have a doubt that's to do with the problem of evil. You've heard it, you kind of think you know what it is, but you've not really read much about it. You don't really know much about it. You've not thought about it much. You've not really spoken about it to many people. You think you know what Islam has to say about it, but you can't, in your mind, if you ask yourself, have I really read a book about this, or have I engaged in any significant conversation or discussion about this? The answer is no, I haven't. Well, perhaps you're not prepared for this, right? Perhaps you're not prepared. So if you don't understand the context of the doubt, maybe it's not a good idea to try to give absolute answers. Do you understand? You don't know the first thing about a particular aspect of theodicy and the problem of evil, and here you are giving concrete answers to the person. You don't know the issue, right? You're giving concrete answers about whether evolution is compatible with Islam or not, but you've not read anything about it. You've not looked into what the experts have to say about it. Do you understand? And you're just like, and off you go. You're giving answers just based on just stuff you've picked up, like stuff that you can't quite pinpoint, but you've picked up. You're not the right person for it. And it may well be that they think you are knowledgeable, and that absolute answer that you give, an answer that basically says a clear yes or a no, this isn't compatible with Islam, this is compatible with Islam, or something like that. That person, again, feels confirmed. They feel as though their doubt has been confirmed, right? And that indeed there is a problem in their mind with Islam, but actually there isn't, or there may not be. They've just been misguided into thinking there is a problem because of your absolute answer. Because you've not considered the possibility that there is nuance in this issue, and what really needed to happen was they needed to be referred to somebody who was well read on that particular issue, who understands the issue properly, and therefore knows the nuance. Right? So, really, really important. If you don't understand the context of the doubt, then don't start giving absolute, answers, clear-cut kind of answers, all wrapped up and packaged and handed over. Right? No. consider what your level of knowledge is, because it may well be that if they go to somebody with the proper knowledge and expertise, there's some nuances that you don't know about that may well turn out to that may well end up giving them an answer that actually completely allays their doubts and answers their questions. Okay, and finally, the next one is answers are often not enough. Sometimes a person comes to you for an answer, but actually an answer isn't what they want. And this kind of overlaps with some of the other points. An answer isn't what they want. What they've actually come to you with is a cry for help. What they've come to you with is someone that they can express their frustrations to, right? And perhaps there's a lot more to come. The doubt in Islam is kind of what's fronting a deeper problem, right? It's the face of a deeper problem, and what needs to happen is you need to enter into a dialogue. So sometimes the answer isn't enough, and for that reason, what needs to happen is you need to take on board all of the points that I have said so far, and hopefully what that will do is it will enable you to do the next thing, which is build trust. And if you can build trust with that person and give them something of an open door policy, truly help them and say, I'm here to help you, I'm here to talk to you, inshallah, to the best of my ability, then you've given them what they've really come for. They've come for help. They've come for a shoulder to cry on. They've come they've come seeking somebody who they can just talk to, right, about these things that are tearing them up inside. And just being able to talk to you sometimes means that they're in a dialogue. Just the fact that they've been able to reason about this issue with them means that they've actually produced an answer from within themselves. They've realized that actually, I don't have this doubt. These were just questions, but actually the real problem is something else, right? It could be that it's a cry for help, and that they're entertaining doubts about Islam because they have serious issues of abuse and other stresses and anxieties in life that they've been able to sound out with you, and because you've had that open door policy, you've won their trust, and now they feel that, and once they've received some help about that, they feel less anxious, less stressed about those things, and now those doubts aren't so pronounced. And in my experience dealing with people, I have seen how people come with a particular issue, a particular problem, and because I've kept the dialogue going, it later transpired that actually it wasn't so much doubts in Islam and so on. That's just what ended up bothering them. But when we look at how they came to entertain those doubts, there's a bigger story, there's a wider story, there's somebody else's involvement, right, and so on. So anyway, I think that was 8 things to think about when speaking to somebody who has doubts about Islam. It could be anybody. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our young people, inshallah ta'ala, and protect all of us from doubts and from apostasy, which is a real problem nowadays. If you found this video beneficial and useful, inshallah ta'ala, like it, give us a subscribe. What's the other thing? Yeah, notifications. Activate notifications so you're notified. Inshallah, we'll frequently put out videos, this kind of content, as well as just general Islamic lifestyle stuff, inshallah ta'ala. And also, since this is about doubts and so on, it's a massive problem with young people. We talked about how young people increasingly are not associating with deen. And one of the things we've done at Mawarid Lifestyle to tackle this is we've introduced some courses for young people that will address some of these issues and teach them the foundations of Islam in a way, inshallah ta'ala, that will make them resilient to doubt. So parents, young people who are between the ages of 14 and 18, and parents of young people who are between 14 and 18, please check out those courses. One of them is the Youth Mentoring Program. The other is the Learned Youth Program. The Learned Youth Program is just a bit more intense, a bit more content heavy and contact heavy than the Youth Mentoring Program. Check them out, read all about them, inshallah ta'ala, and put in an application for yourself as a young person, or for your son or for your daughter. And that's it with this video. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our Iman and protect all of us. Wa jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.